Okay, so I'm seeing the numbers tick up now, so I think we'll make a start. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, but thank you for joining us. This today is the case study onboarding webinar. So for those interested in the European Green Digital Coalition and taking part in the case study. My name's Felix Prettyjohn. I'm an Associate Director at the Carbon Trust, and we are in a partnership for this collaboration with Jesse and PricewaterhouseCoopers. But I'll be leading the session today. And today we're going to go through everything hopefully you need to know to understand about participating with a case study in the European Green Digital Phase 2 project. So we'll go through an introduction, an overview of the methodology and what avoided emissions calculations mean. We'll then look at the eligibility criteria for submitting a case study and the data requirements for them. And then we'll pause for some questions because that can be quite a lot of information in the first part of the session. And then we'll go back to for my presentation on what to expect when the case study is selected. So taking you through the submission process and giving you some guidance for that process, and then looking at next steps, which will include a timeline for when we'll be delivering the case studies, because it's a 2-year project. And then we'll have another Q&A at the end, just to give you 2 opportunities to ask any questions you might have. So to start with, there's quite a lot of content I want to take you through today, but I'd really like you to leave with a clear understanding of the eligibility criteria for the case studies, how we'll be selecting and prioritizing those case studies which are submitted, and a really good understanding of the data requirements and the submission process for developing an EGDC case study. And then following that, if that's all clear, then we want to communicate to you the next steps and how you can participate. So we really want to underline that we're here to support you throughout the process. There is participation required from your side, but our role here is to make it as easy for you as possible. So feel free to ask us any questions during today's session. If you want to follow up after the session, let us know if there's more questions you need to answer, and we'll try and help as best as we can. So before we jump into all of the case study eligibility requirements and data requirements, first we just want to make sure it's clear, like, what are the benefits to you for participating? So the EU Commission have provided significant funding for this project, and this is provided so that you can help you develop your case studies. So it's a really good opportunity to take advantage of that funding and the free advisory support that's being offered. And one of the things we really want to do, and the main aim for this project, is to demonstrate the beneficial impacts of ICT. We spend a lot of time talking about the communication of footprints and the negative impacts of ICT, but this project is aimed to really demonstrate that ICT can be used for good and help scale the use of green digital technologies. The methodology is now linked to the EU taxonomy, so and that's Annex 8.2. So this should be able to provide you with access to capital and give you more support in sustainable financing and demonstrate why you're eligible for that financing. And then finally, in terms of growth opportunities, by developing a case study and having the R&D of that process, it supports development of net zero and transition aligned technologies and help you hopefully grow a new area of revenue. So I'm going to go into an overview of the methodology. Now, we're going to do it at a relatively high level and just explain to start with what the methodology does. So this was developed in phase 1, and it's a standardized science-based way to calculate the net carbon impact of a solution. So I'm going to go into the next slide about what the net impact means. But the framework includes it's a consistent structure for evaluating both the direct emissions and avoided emissions and rebound effects, which make up the net impact. It's aligned with international standards. It was based on and developed from the ITU L1480 recommendation and developed in alignment with WBCSD guidance on avoided emissions. And it also contains general principles that apply across all digital solutions for doing these kind of assessments. Supporting that, we did also create 6 sector-specific methodologies, which are not so much, they contain slight bit of methodology, but really demonstrating case studies of how these can be implemented in different sectors and might be useful.
It's you too.
Sorry, I'm just getting someone's audio. If you could make sure I mute that, would be great. Thank you. So there are 6 sector-specific methodologies in support of that as well. So for calculating avoided emissions, it's essentially a comparison of 2 scenarios. You have your reference scenario, which is shown on the green on the left-hand side, and your ICT solution scenario, which is shown on the far right. And the net impact is the difference between these 2 scenarios. But what you see in the middle are the steps between how we calculate that. So these are the steps that go into calculating the ICT solution scenario. So the solution emissions, these are the life cycle emissions of the solution itself. So we had to introduce an ICT solution to get this impact, but that itself has emissions. So that's the footprint of the overall solution. Then we have the avoided emissions. So this is, for example, if you're eliminating waste, this would be the emissions that didn't occur because that waste had been eliminated. And then finally, you have rebound emissions. So this could be an effect of if you're transporting the food more efficiently, then you might end up resulting in more transport. So the solution scenario considers all those 3 aspects, it goes from the footprint to the avoided emissions, any additional rebound effects. And this is compared against the reference scenario, which is a life cycle emissions of all the activities that would have occurred without the ICT solution. And this is done using general LCA principles. So the complexity of the case study is really dependent on the complexity of the solution. And the amount of data that you need really depends on how each effect is measured. So there's no one size fits all or no one answer that we can give to say this is how much data you're going to need to collect. You will find that with the 2 scenarios, particularly with the avoided emissions and the ICT solution scenario, we do want to get as much primary data as possible about the impact of the solution. Depending what the reference scenario is, that might be some primary data, or it could also be secondary data that shows a reference, so a reference scenario, essentially a reference point. But it's very hard to say in general what this is, but we'll go into more about the data requirements later. So for the eligibility criteria for the solutions, and I hope that's showing up a bit bigger on your screen than it's mine, we have just high-level eligibility criteria for the actual solution itself. So the first one is pretty straightforward. Like the ICT solution needs to enable or result in an emissions reduction. Secondly, the ICT solution has to do no significant harm to other social or environmental indicators. At the moment, we're only assessing solutions in terms of carbon, but this is important to keep in consideration because we shouldn't be supporting solutions that have a clear negative effect elsewhere. Thirdly, the solution should not be applied to activities involving the exploration, extraction, mining, production, anything to do with the fossil fuel supply chain. And this is because we don't want to support and create lock-in in the fossil fuels industry. That's not the main purpose. We're trying to have carbon benefits, system benefits, even if there are some minor benefits or some benefits that could be achieved through that. And finally, what we're looking for is for people who are submitting for solutions to have data supported by the developer and the implementer, or otherwise supported to have sufficient data for the case study. So those 4 things are really important to be able to have an eligible solution for us to take forward. We'll also consider the maturity of the solution. So solutions go through development cycles, and some might be fully developed and being deployed already, and this is fantastic. That's great because we can get data from those deployments. But we also understand that some solutions are still in development and might not yet be deployed at all, or might be deployed in a limited capacity. So we have a preference for mature deployed solutions because this helps us to collect data. But it might also be in development and you have some lab testing data, or you've done some piloting that will allow us to collect data as well. For solutions that are not yet deployed, there is some scope for us doing what we call ex ante calculations before it's been implemented, ideally with some lab test or pilot data that would help support it. We also want, for anybody who is involved in phase 1, there were several case studies that were submitted and could not be completed because for a range of different reasons, data availability, maturity, but we really welcome for those solutions to be resubmitted this time. Hopefully some of the gaps that existed then have now been closed, and this gives us an opportunity to pick up where we left off with those solutions. And then finally, we will be looking for both existing, not both, but existing partially developed and new case studies. So if you've got a case study that you've already been working on, we'll happily help you finish that and complete that. If you've got a completed case study that you want to be validated as aligned to the EGDC, we will also do that. Obviously, and of course, a lot of them will be completely new, which will help you throughout the whole development process. If there are case studies that are available and need to be validated or are partially done, we'll focus on these in year 1 to give new case studies more time for the data collection. So the solution itself has eligibility criteria, but it's also likely that if you're submitting a case study, you'll want to be involved in a publication of the results. And to do this, there is some criteria around the role of the organization or the case study owner. And this is because there are long supply chains within technologies, and at some point we need to have a cutoff. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the roles that are eligible. So the organization can either qualify as a user of a solution or a technology provider for the solution. And within the technology provider, the organization has to qualify as the innovator of the solution, the developer or integration of the end-to-end solution, deployment of the solution, or a provider of the component of the solution. So we recognize that there's a lot of organizations that are involved in the development of a particular solution. And within that, some people might be providing components or integrators. So it's designed to try and cover as many of those as possible. If you're a provider of a component of a solution, we ask that the component has an essential and substantial role in achieving the savings from that solution. The component must be developed or modified to make it specialized to the ICT solution. So it's not a generic component that could be used in lots of solutions where some solutions have benefits and some solutions don't. And the organization can evidence that the component is being used in that solution. If there are questions about this, we can go into this a bit, but if it gets too technical and you're not sure about eligibility, we'll cover this in the submission form and we can support that. So yeah, on the right hand side there is an example. So I'll just go through the ineligible example. Is say a cloud platform provider that supplies a generic computational service to lots of customers, and it's unaware how those services are deployed, but it believes that it is used in some beneficial solutions. So go through a few reasons to summarize why case studies might not be suitable. So the first is time frame. So if your case study can't be completed or you can't collect data within the time frame of the project, clearly that's not going to be eligible. We've just talked about on the previous slide the connection to the solution. So the case study owner's role in the solution is not sufficient to claim avoided emissions. Thirdly, would be an unsuitable reference scenario. So in these cases, we'll probably ask you to revise it and see if there's a different reference scenario that can be looked at. But the reference scenario you've been given could be market average. So it could be a generic B2B teleconferencing like we're using now is considered a market average solution, and it wouldn't be relevant to say that travel was the alternate for today's meeting. Or an unsuitable reference that might be an incremental version of an existing solution. So comparing a generation 1 versus generation 2. What we're trying to do here is show the impact of ICT. We're not trying to single out particular solutions as showing incremental improvements over the previous one. And finally, then, unsuitable data. So can't supply or collect the necessary data, and this could be related to the footprint or footprint estimate of the solution, or it could be we can't get lab tested or simulated or pilot or data from the implementation for the effect of the solution. We do want to be able to demonstrate the actual effect of the solution, not hypothetical effects. So that comes on to data requirements. So assessing, like I said before, assessing a net carbon impact is a comparison between two scenarios. Every ICT solution is going to be different. So even though I'll go through this example, each will have its own nuances and will be unique. So we will try and support you through the submission process. If you've got any questions, like I said, do just let us know. But in this case, we're showing an example of a building management system ICT solution. So the reference scenario, this is looking at cooling and lighting. And this is on the left-hand side without any building management solution control. So that's those uncontrolled systems and whatever the energy use was in that scenario. Then we want to compare it to the ICT solution scenario, where we have monitoring controls via smart thermostats, via the occupancy sensors, automatic scheduling, automated blinds, etc. And this should result in a lower energy use for the building, and that's what we want to try and find that comparison. That's the avoided emissions comparison. In addition, we also have to consider the additional emissions generated by the ICT solution. So by those sensors, by the controls, we have to think about the footprint that they did and compare that and include that in the assessment as well. So this slide is more for reference. It goes through, there's a lot of text on there, so I'm not going to read through it. We'll go through an example of this on the next slide. But it goes through the assessment boundary, functional unit. These are the typical things we're going to be asking for you to describe what data you could provide or what you may be providing, plan to collect in the submission form. So to go through that as an example, so we're going to ask about the assessment boundary. So we want to consider, in the example of the building management solution, we want to consider like the location of the building, what's its size, what's the building type, and what we want to understand is the boundary and is the data going to be relevant. So if we're doing a building management system, obviously seasonal variation will occur. So are we collecting 1 year of data? Is that the boundary, or are we doing 1 month, which would be less representative? We'll ask about the functional unit. Now, again, this might be something that we develop along the process, so you don't have to get it right first time. It just is an idea of what you believe to be is the best suited functional unit. So for a building management system, this could be the energy saving per square meter in the office building maintained at 21 degrees during office hours. A reference scenario emission. So this is a description of the reference scenario and what data we'll be collecting. So in this case, it would be annual energy consumption of the building before the solution was implemented in kilowatt hours. And we'll get an understanding of what type of data. Is this based on actual data from meter readings or invoices, or is this an estimated data, for example? For solution emissions, this is when we're looking at the life cycle. So if you have a footprint of the solution, fantastic, we'll take that. If you don't have a footprint and you've got a high level estimates, they're also applicable. In most cases, it depends on how the difference between the size of the footprint and the size of the avoided emission. So if we're doing a really high level estimate for a footprint, and the high level estimate of the footprint is very close to the avoided emissions, we'd like to understand the footprint a bit better. But in most cases, an estimate is okay. But if you have a footprint available already, that's a very good starting point. Then the solution scenario emissions. So in the building management solution scenario, this is the energy consumption of the building after the solution was implemented. And the last thing is higher order effects. So these include rebound effects or other impacts that could result from the implementation of the solution. So at this point, when we're asking for the in the submission form, it's just any that you're aware of now. This is not something you have to identify fully now. We will support you through that in the case study. And then I think final slide before we get to Q&A, I think, is just the data quality hierarchy. So I mentioned we have a preference for sort of primary measured data. So that sits right at the top of the triangle. And this is measured data from an implemented solution that has ideally, I don't know, a good time frame of coverage over suitable time frame, and possibly from multiple implementations. The next down is when that's not available from an implemented solution is modeled or simulated data. So this could be computer simulations, it could be some based on some lab test data, but it is not directly from a real world implementation. Below that are then secondary sources. So we try to use this as limited as possible, but it might be that sometimes you've got data on the ICT solution implementation, but actually you just don't have any data for what happened before then. So nothing for the reference scenario. And in this case, we might be able to use secondary data sources, such as typical building energy uses in particular regions. So there might be some secondary sources we could use. And then finally is this hypothetical or research informed data. So an EGDC aligned case study wouldn't qualify using hypothetical data. It does have to have measured data. But it might be the case that we go through a case study, it gets to a point where we're missing some data, and we've put some effort into the case study development. So we've got a tool, but it's just not EGDC aligned. Some of it has to be populated with hypothetical research data. So that would be our least preferred, and we'll obviously be prioritizing solutions that have collected data. And so we're hoping we don't have any case studies that end up with any hypothetical data. So I'll pause now. I've been talking to you for a while, probably quite a lot to cover there. So if you do have any questions, please raise your hand or put anything in the chat, and I will try my best to respond.
Thank you so much for taking us through that. I guess one of my questions was, in terms of the data that you mentioned there, how do you anticipate the calculations being done? So do you anticipate, is there an option for like organizations to do those calculations with the data and then share the results? I'm kind of thinking of approvals and like kind of bureaucracy inside companies, and what level of like kind of validation or verification do you anticipate being needed?
So most case studies will be asking you for support on data collection, and then we'll be doing the calculation. But we have reserved, and we will support organizations who want to do the calculations themselves, because this can be beneficial for capacity building and as well, if you haven't done them before, or in cases that, as you're saying, there might be some bureaucracy or red tape. So we'll try and support you as best we can. If you are doing the calculation yourself, we will still need to be able to see the data that's going into the model. We can't just see an output of a model and say, great, and put a rubber stamp on it. We'll still have to see and understand how the calculation was performed and what it's based on.
Okay, super, really helpful. Thank you.
Next, I think we have Dr. Angelos. I can't see your surname, sorry.
Yes, hi. I have two questions. The first could be rather short. You said that developers and implementers should demonstrate that their support. How do you expect that this demonstration is given? And the second is, when you talking about life cycle, do you say also the emissions, let's say, bound to the to the existing solution and in place, and also the emission, let's say, during the manufacturing of the new solution, the equipment? Do you need this both calculations? Because for the new ones, we could rather easily collect the information, but not for the old things.
Okay, so the first question,
Yeah.
the way we're asking you to demonstrate it is just through the submission form. Is when we're asking, we'll be asking you to describe the data that you'll be able to provide. In some cases, you might not know yet, and we're going to come on to different deliveries of different batches, and so we'd like you to submit what you know now. If you're still unsure about certain bits of data, you can put that on the form. So that's the first bit. And the second piece of the data need will be full life cycle. So if we look at the ICT solution, we would want to know its footprint. So what the emissions went into its manufacture up to the point of it being deployed. And then, as you're saying, you should have the information on the use phase as well. So you should be able to incorporate all of that. Do you think that would pose a problem, because you said there are some in the past it might be difficult to get information for? Is that the previous solutions that have been manufactured?
Yes, exactly. This one, or let's say if we are replacing cables by wireless, how to retrieve the data, the emissions which happens for the production of the cables.
So if there's, for the production of the cables, if you're replacing them and they're not really your equipment, or their old equipment, we can try and support, because we can support with footprinting as well. So we can find some find sources to say some average sources for that kind of specific thing. So if there's specific data points you're missing, we'll be able to help fill in the gaps. It's what we really need your support on is getting the data from the solution being implemented and the other data points that we won't have access to that are specific to the solution.
Good, thank you very much.
And Hippocrates, I hope I said that right.
Yes, that's exactly as you pronounce it. So thank you for this. Thank you first of all about the presentation, and I actually have several questions, but I will try to sum up. It's mostly about the submission of a proposal. So I was wondering, is there any particular template that we're supposed to follow, on how to do this proposal, or because I'm quite sure that while we will be working on this proposal, and we will try to gather all data necessary, some more questions will show up apparently. So apart from the first question that I already made, I was wondering whether is there any contact for us that we can raise our questions and have some clear answers, or maybe some quick ones. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're providing a submission form after this, which is just an online form where you can provide, and so it'll be standardized for everyone. If you haven't actually checked if it's got attachments, so if you've got briefs, so if you're saying you've already got a proposal or something that you've got some information in, I'll check that you can provide that as well as a supporting attachment. In terms of contact, I think you should have, I'll have to check with Giovanni or someone else. There should be a general EGDC contact email that you can get in touch with. But also once you've submitted and we've started reviewing the case studies, we'll then be directly in contact with you. So if there's any further questions you have, we can then just have a direct communication.
Okay, thank you so much.
So yeah, we do want to support everyone as much as possible through this process. So let us know if you have questions. I think Eugenia, I think Dr. Angelos, your hand is still up. So I think it's Eugenia next.
Yeah, it's unclear to me, what. So I understand that for the case studies, we need to come up with the data and set the boundary conditions. But isn't the calculation going to be made by the EUDC, correct?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
we'll do the
correct
calculations. So,
okay.
so we'll help. Yeah, and also once you've submitted the form, we'll help you understand the data to collect as well. So we're asking what data you think you have in the submission form. It doesn't have to be a complete view. It doesn't have to be all correct, because that's what we're trying to help you with. It's just trying to get an initial understanding of what data you have so that we can understand where we go from there and what our next steps are.
So it's an iterative process and it's interactive. Sorry, I couldn't make it for the first 15 minutes of the call. That's why maybe I'm asking the question.
No, it's all right. Actually, and no, it's fine. And next, I'm going to go on to the process, the submission process, like what information we're going to ask for, and how we'll prioritize them. So that will come up next as well.
So when will we receive the form? You probably already said yes.
No, I mean that's at the end. But we were sending out after the submission. After this webinar, we'll be sending out the form to everyone. I think it will probably be in a couple of days, because from this, I think I've just realized we should add an attachment. So we'll probably have to update the form a bit. Okay, if there's no more questions, I will carry on. So yeah, we're now going to go through. Harris, did you want to just jump in with a question before we get started?
Yes, please. My question is the level of the maturity, let's say, of the technology, or the level of innovation does play a role in selecting the use cases that will finally picked up, or it's I mean it just needed to be an innovative, a rather innovative, let's say, solution that has proven track record on the market.
So maturity, I mean, we'd quite like to get as many innovative and new and sort of pushing the boundary technologies as we can, because that would be fantastic. The challenge sometimes is them having the right data. So I think if you've got a solution like that, we'd love to hear from you and submit it, and then we can try and work out if the right data is available. So when we set our preferences for maturity is for implemented case studies, it's because it's typically easier to get that data. But on the same hand, we want to showcase the best of the technologies we have. So we'll try and support you as best we can.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So for the development, if we're taking on a case study, this is the overall development, and where we are now is we're at the submission stage, and we'll go through an evaluation, a case study development, and then publication of the case studies. So this is just an overview slide. I'll go more over them in following slides. But what we want to make it clear is that we understand that we've got a 2-year program. We'll have to deliver them in different batches. So once submitted case studies, we'll review the case studies and we'll assign them to the 4 development batches. We do have several intakes throughout the 2-year period, but we will fill as many as possible from the first intake. So as we've been saying, don't wait for later batches and don't wait for later intakes. We want to know if you've got a solution now. This will not only help us, but also it will help you, because we can help you understand the data that we need, and we can have that back and forward discussion starting now rather than in 6 months or 12 months time. So here we've got batch 1, which is starting in July to November, and this has got some great publication opportunities, because right at the end of the batch in October we have a large EGDC event planned of our own, and then going into November, obviously this is in time for COP, where there'll be a significant presence, and it would be great if we can get some case studies, some really high impact case studies that get lots of exposure ready for then. So if you have a solution that is ready to go, let's try and prioritize them and get them into batch 1, so we can get them get that well publicized. In batch 2, This is starting from November to March, and then we have on the next slide sort of batch 3 and batch 4. So I just want to really bring home the point that case studies do not need to be ready when they are submitted. So submit as early as possible and secure your place in one of the 4 batches. We've got data collection showing on these slides, and that's sort of the really focused data collection support that you'll get from us. But it doesn't mean, like if you're in batches 2 to 4, if you're submitting it now, we'll still provide you some initial guidance in advance of the batch starting to help you collect the data. So in year 2, we'll have the final 2 batches. So this is batch 3 from April to August, and then batch 4 from September to January. So just to put that all on one slide, so it's a bit easier for you to take away. We'll be filling up all the batches from the first intake. So your best chance of selection will be to submit as early as possible. Now, the submission form is basically a description of the data that you think you'll be able to have is sort of one of the key parts. And please fill this up with the information you have right now. We don't expect you to get all of the data collection requirements in there, and I mean, if you do, that's fantastic, makes our life very easy, but provide us with the information you think you have. We don't expect case studies to be ready to go, so we'll be scheduling them out across the batches, but do submit early so we can help you with the submission and guide you. The first batch is starting very soon. As you saw, it starts from July to November. So we are asking for the batch 1 submission, and as many others as well as possible, for the Wednesday, the 25th of June. We'll then confirm by the Friday, the 4th of July, which case studies will be included in batch 1. And then we'll have the kickoff calls with those who've been selected starting from Monday, the 14th. So this is quite compressed timing. So if you do have a solution you want to get in batch 1, obviously let us know through the submission, and we'll try and start talking about it as soon as we can to make sure we've got the availability, because it'll also be over the holiday period. So we're going to focus on those discussions first. Well, obviously there'll be other ones in other batches. If you're submitting by the 25th of June and we've told you another batch, we'll then be in touch with you slightly later on to then start discussing the data requirements that you might need and any support you might need. This slide will hopefully be a useful reference for coming back to. So if you're selected in one of the other batches, these are the timings that we'll be starting. But we also have other intakes. If you just can't get the information to us by the 25th of June, we'll have batch 2 in October, batch 3 in March 2026, and batch 4 in August 2026. So there are future opportunities, but they may fill up and we can't guarantee there'll still be spaces. Oh yeah, one final point, sorry, is if we've assigned you to a batch, but you're ready to go, we may have capacity to start it earlier. We may get in touch and try and ask if you're ready to start earlier as well. We've judged the batch sizes and the capacity we think we'll need, but if we do have additional capacity and you're ready to go, we might ask you to start earlier. So the development process for a case study. Now this is once we've kicked off the batch, we'll go through an engagement call. So we've probably already discussed the data requirements somewhat before the start, but this will have a really deep dive to get an understanding of the case study, of all of the different elements we'll need to take into account. And here we can finalize the data requirements and anything left to collect. We'll then move on to the data collection process. So the case study owner was responsible for doing the data collection, but we will be offering support throughout this process. Then we'll go on to the development of the case study. This is for us to do, but in cases when people would like some shared capacity building, we can do this supporting an organization to do the calculation. Finally, there goes to review and publication. So it is initially, if we've done the case study, we'll ask you to review it, provide any feedback before all case studies will then go and be reviewed by the advisory board and consortium. Once that's done, we're then ready for publication, where we will publish it on the website and provide a sort of a marketing ready version of the case study. So the submission process, it's just one submission form. It doesn't take that long. It's about 20 minutes to fill in all the information. So please, it shouldn't be too difficult to do. Please let us know if you do have any issues. And if you do have multiple solutions you'd like to submit, we'll make it so that the form should be able to make this easier. So it's not like it'll be 20 minutes for each submission. It should get quicker if you have multiple solutions. So of the information we need, we obviously need to understand about your organization, contact details, general background, but then about the solution, we'll look at the sector and the implementation geography. The solution details is sort of one of the large parts of the form, which has a few questions on the solution, its use case, how it's deployed, the reference scenario, so what would happen if the solution wasn't implemented, and how the solution reduces emissions, so just getting an understanding of the mechanisms that it's delivering avoided emissions by. Then we have questions on its maturity and the data availability. Before finally, there's just wider impact of the solution and its scalability. And sorry, very importantly, the last point is concerns with data sharing and whether an NDA will be needed. So to expand on that last point, for data sharing, the key purpose of the EGDC project is to share the case study and the calculator publicly. So you have to be comfortable with the idea that we'll be sharing the marketing sort of high level result case study, but also a calculator will be disclosed. Now, if required, if there's sensitive raw data that is based on, we can make sure that stays outside of the public domain, but we'll still be having a calculator that shows the different mechanisms, say, of the case study that will be public. So do make us aware, there's a place on the form to do so, of any concerns you have about data sharing, or even if it's data sharing with us. But like we said, we will, if needed, we can set up NDAs to do this. So I'm not, this slide is helpful to take away a bit. I'm just going to touch on it at a high level, but we've covered a lot of it already. But this is just saying how we'll be evaluating and prioritizing case studies. So we've got 50 case studies to do. So we're hoping to do at least 20 this year, because we've got about 7 or 8 months left of year 1, and then about 30 in year 2. We will be focusing on data quality and availability. This is hugely important, and it's the foundation of the case study. We'll also, as I said, have a preference for implemented solutions over pre-implemented solutions. We have to do a minimum of 15 solutions that are based on real life data from implemented solutions. And we'll also aim to have a spread across a few different solutions, across a few different sectors. We have previously, you might have seen communications of the sectors that EGDC has focused on. You can submit a case study for any sector, but we will try and get a good spread across a range of sectors rather than having them all related to transport or agriculture, say. Finally, so we'll just go on to next step. So how do you participate? So I showed you the dates on the previous slide. So case studies to be submitted on the online form by Wednesday, 25th of June for batch 1. So we'd like you to, the deadline, this is the deadline for batch 1. So if you want to be a partake in batch 1, you have to submit by the 25th of June. We'd also like any other solutions for any batches to be submitted by this date as well, as far as this is possible. Like I said, there are further dates in the future if this is not possible, but this will help you secure your place in a future batch now. Please let us know if you have any questions relating to the submission process. You've got the general inquiries email in the chat, and so if there's any concerns, do let us know. Once your case study has been submitted, we'll confirm the batch allocations by 4th of July, and then we'll start setting up engagement calls with batch 1 from the Monday, 14th of July. For those who are not in batch 1, we'll start throughout the month of July. Once we've started kicking off batch 1 and got that started, we'll then provide feedback for case studies in future batches that might require a bit of support to meet data collection or eligibility requirements. So even if you submit on the 25th of June, we'll probably let you know, well, we will let you know the batch allocations by 4th of July, but you might not then hear back anything else until towards the end of July. Okay, that was everything I wanted to go through today. So now another chance for any questions you might have, and I'll try my best. Hi, Reniers.
Hi, Manon. I work for the city of Brussels, and I was wondering, you said you will send the file in a few days. Will it be like an online form where we can go and back and save our answers? Because
yeah, I don't.
We will need to go back and forth and to save it.
I don't know if it's got. It's a Microsoft form, so I don't know if it's got functionality to be able to save. I will ask about that, but it will be an online form that you could submit your case study to.
Okay. And another question was, in case like the results are really bad, and so you said you will publicly communicate about it. Is there a way that we can like improve things and that there is a delay in between the publication of the results and the fact that the city might want to improve itself? Because that's definitely something that will like, yeah, you cannot foresee everything in a DNA. And so I think, yeah, these are questions that will raise up. And if you have more information about what will exactly be published and how and what you will include in the NDAs, that will already be helpful in advance.
Yeah, so I think that the NDAs will be for us sharing sort of data that go and support the case study. In terms of what will be published, you'll get a chance to review your case study, and if you're not happy with the results or we push back, I mean, we're not going to publish something that you're not happy with at the end of the day. So if it's that actually this is just the version 1 and there's more development to be done in the marketing sort of like high level version of the case study, we can make sure that the messaging supports what the case study has done. So if it's a pilot and we expect that the impacts to be get better over time or to get better with data, we can of course put that into that narrative. So I mean, we're working with you on these. We want them to serve both like you, so you get the benefit from the case study, and we want them to show the benefit of ICT. I don't think we want to be publishing anything that shows it's a bad case study. So does that help?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I'll talk for a second, see if there's any other questions that come in. But yeah, we just wanted to. Key point from today was the submission form should take maximum about 20 minutes. It shouldn't be too burdensome. We're asking you to provide the best knowledge that you have now, so that we can plan out the deliveries, work out which solutions will be able to start in batch 1 and which will be later on, and be able to offer you support to understand what will be needed to when we start the case study. So please do submit your forms solutions as early as you can. The email address is there on the right if you have any follow-up questions. This recording will be available, so please do, if you missed the start and you want to go back and watch anything, please do so and share it with any colleagues or anyone else who might find it relevant. If there are no more questions, I think we will wrap up there. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.